What we want to do today is to talk about this marvellous stuff, lube or lubrication, whatever you want to call it, as an aid to calving cows. Now, it's wonderful stuff, and all of us have had nuts and bolts which are rusted through and we can't shift. A bit of oil does a marvellous job and makes it completely different and a lot easier. And the same is true of lube. The problem with this is, of course, how can we get it where we want it? And I can give you a marvellous demonstration of that, because if we put a heap on our hands like that and we try and get it into the cow, and if the calf is halfway in the canal and we try and smear it around the calf, you know, it just slides all over the place and it's very difficult to get where we want it. And if the calf is tight, then it very nicely scrapes all the lube off and we have an empty hand going into where the lube is needed on the calf itself before it comes through the canal. So Alwyn has a clever idea, a very simple idea of actually making sure the lube easily goes where it's needed to be effective.
Yes, Basil. So one way that can help you get lubrication where you want it when you're calving a cow is to use a calf stomach tube. And this could be a new or a used calf stomach tube. There's a few considerations though, first of all, before you use it. First of all, it needs to be in good condition still. So in particular, the end of the tube should not have any sharp edges, because that could cause damage in the cow or injury to the cow. Secondly, it needs to be clean, okay? So particularly if it's been used before, make sure that you give it a good clean, and then that it's sterilized using hot water or maybe some sterilizing solution. And thirdly, we would recommend strongly that you use these sort of pre-made lubrication gels, okay? But then as is at the moment, this stuff is too thick to go through the tube. So you need to think about a way of we need to think about a way of thinning it, and one way of doing that is to mix it with hot water to enable it to flow through the tube. So those are the three things you need to think about before you start. Right. Okay, so how might we do this? Well, Basil, would you mind giving me a hand? If you could hold that for me. First thing is to close the tube, and most of these stomach tubes come with a stopper, so just close that, or you can just kink the tube. So I've got some hot water here, ready made, or ready boiled. This is boiling water from the tap actually, but just hot water will do. When you come to using it, it does need to be at body temperature, okay? So, but I think mixing the water with the cold lube will actually bring the temperature down. So I'm now going to mix the lubrication with the water here. So I'm going to put all of this, almost all of this in here. So it's a case of mixing, letting it in.
Roughly how much water did you put in there?
About a litre.
Yeah.
And then this container has about half a litre, you know, so we're talking about a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah. And we're ending up with about 1.5 litres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you can close your tube. You can either use a zip, or you can just, you know, lower it up a little bit like this, and then give it a good mix. Okay, so now we have a solution here that's consisting of water and lubrication. So, when you come to using it, the first thing it's a good idea to do is to put some lubrication obviously on your hand. Oh, apologies. And also on the end of the tube as well. Okay. When we're ready to use, we then lubricate our hand and the tube, and then we can pass the tube into the cow and use your hand to guide the tube to where you want it. Okay? And we're aiming towards the top side of the calf, so that when you're depositing the lube falls, you know, with gravity around the side of the calf. Then once it's in place, you open your tap, you hold it in place, and then sometimes it might need a little squeeze to get going. And like you can see here, you know, you're then using it into gravity, and you can direct it to where you want it to be, and you can advance it forward so it goes over the back of the calf as well, you know. And if you have an assistant to help you hold the tube, even better, you know, because they can hold the tube and squeeze it into place and squeeze the lube through. One thing to think about is when you're advancing the tube into the cow is that at times, in particular, if the head of the calf is perhaps central and pressing against the top of the pelvis, at the top of the pelvis you've got a little protrusion of the pelvis, and sometimes it can be difficult to get anything past there. So what I would recommend is that you direct your tube, you know, slightly to the side, so at, you know, 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock position, in order to be able to get it past the head then and towards the neck of the calf, where you can for depositing the lube.
Right, Alwyn, then to summarise, 4 points, important points I pulled out of it is, first, if you're worried about a cow and thinking you ought to get inside and investigate what's happening, before you do anything, make up a lube solution, have it ready, because you're almost certainly bound to use it. Secondly, when you've got hold of her, get your hand in, work out what's wrong, and if you think that the legs are there and it'd be handy to have the ropes on, put the ropes on first. And finally, then put as much as you can of that 1.5 litres of diluted lube into the cow and make it slip out as easily as possible.
One thing I'd like to add to that is that despite how much lubrication you use, a safe amount of force to apply when you're pulling a calf, you know, is reasonable. 2 people pulling on a rope, or a moderate amount of force using a calving aid. And if you're not making progress, then you need to call the vet.